I'll call the January 8th study session of the Newport Beach City Council to order. Do we have the roll call, please?
The record will reflect that all members are present. Rosansky is just away from his seat.
Okay. First item is clarification of items on the consent calendar. Councilwoman Gardner? Councilmember Curry?
No items. We need to add one for the appointments that we'll talk about when we get to the council meeting that was left off of the 1-1 committee.
Okay. Councilmember Webb?
I have some questions on item number 12, and I intend to pull that tonight to ask those questions. And I've given each of you a memo that outlines what my concerns are.
Okay. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Daigle?
Number 16, serious matter. We're getting a police dog, and I was wondering, do we have a name picked out for the dog yet? Okay. Me too.
Okay. Councilmember Henn?
Would that be Horst? Homer, I just had one thing. Homer, you may know, I was thinking that Kathy Walcott was on the designated conflict list last year. I may be wrong about that. Can you check base with Robin or somebody before we get to the council and just have somebody let me know about that? Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Rosansky?
Nothing?
Okay. Before we move on to item number 2, I think the city manager has an announcement he'd like to make.
I do have an announcement. It's really an introduction that I would like to make. I know last March when council went through the priority establishing session that you had at the Central Library, one of those priorities was an enhancement of our public outreach and public communication. And then finally culminated yesterday when Tara Finnegan, our new public information manager, came to work. And Tara is in the audience, and I'd like to call her to the microphone so she could introduce herself.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Let me start by saying I'm very happy to be here. The city manager asked me to give you a very brief overview of my background. I just spent the past 9 years working for the City of Orange as their business and public affairs manager. And at the city, I worked on the communication program, community outreach, and media relations. Before that, I was with the Irvine Ranch Water District in community relations. And I started my career for a couple of years. I worked for planning and engineering companies and their marketing departments. But now I work for the city of Newport Beach, and I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to meeting each of you and hearing how we can continue to grow the city's communication program. Okay. Thanks.
Welcome, Tara.
Thank you.
Okay.
Before we go on, I would like to point out that the mayor has graciously given up his office to Tara, since we do have a shortage here and no more portables out there to stuff people into yet.
Well, I know how to get good PR.
There you go. That's why I'm mentioning it, so I can get some good PR too.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the Title 17 Reorganization Council Policy H1 and the Harbor Design Criteria Update.
Mr. Mayor, normally we don't have items on both the study session and on the regular agenda, but since the group homes issue is going to be a lengthy issue tonight, anticipating a lot of public comment, I thought it might be a good idea to have a brief overview of item number 17 so that it wouldn't maybe engender a number of questions and discussion later in the meeting. So that's why we're doing this. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm here to talk about Title 17 and our Council Policy H1 and our Harbor Design Criteria Update. These are 3 documents that we've been working on for many years now, and it's finally come to a culmination this evening. Focusing on the Title 17 and the Council Policy H1, which is our harbor permit policies, both of these documents have been in need of reorganization for the following reasons. The first was to assist the Planning Department in the development of the city's LCP implementation plan, which, as you know, consists of zoning ordinances, zoning district maps, and so on. We want to reorganize Title 17 into a logical format that more closely follows the zoning code's organizational style. We also want to be consistent with the council's priority of aligning our city codes and regulations and policies into the general plan. And we are also advised by the city attorney to incorporate most of council policy H1 into our Title 17, therefore making those rules and regulations more enforceable. The overall result, I'd like to stress, is to make minor revisions and to update the terms, definitions, and outdated sections to eliminate or reduce ambiguity as well as to add clarity. So in other words, there weren't a lot of major changes made to any of these documents. Basically, we reordered them in a style that more closely matches the zoning code and the zoning code style, and changed some wording to make it read easier, but there were no substantial major changes to these documents. And this slide right here just shows all the chapters that we have and their new titles to those chapters, and it's a very long document, and I appreciate the time that you've taken to read through this beforehand, and certainly we're not going to go through it point by point, but I thought maybe I would show you just the chapters here ahead of time, or that's in the beginning. And our H1 policy actually is now dwindled down from approximately 25 pages to about 3 or 4 pages. And really what's left in our harbor permit policies are just the allowances that City Council has made in previous years as to how far folks can build out or construct their piers out into the water. This was language that we felt was most appropriate in a policy document as opposed to Title 17. And so basically it says, from bulkhead number X to Y, you can extend your boat out 10 feet, 20, or your dock out 10 feet, 20 feet. For good reason, those allowances are in there. And so we thought it was important to keep this as part of our policy document. Another major document that we've been working on for many years is our harbor design criteria, which basically tells harbor resources and the building department, as well as our contractors, how to build docks, how to dredge, and how to configure their docks, what's allowable, and keeping our standards up to date. The plan checkers for Harbor Resources and the Building Department have been reviewing documents that are as old as 1973. So it's due time that we revise these documents, bring them up to today's standards. And we did that by, the council approved a contract with Cash & Associates back in 2003, and they spent some time completely revamping our construction and design criteria. And so we have a very sizable document now that is very specific and gives the plan checkers the tools with which to make decisions for the various dock projects that come and filter through our office. The design criteria has been complete for about a year and a half or so, but we thought it was necessary to incorporate the harbor design criteria along with the Title 17 and council policy changes in one document or in one session here to be approved at once, because they very much interrelate with one another. So that's why we held on to the design criteria for some time, because we were anticipating bringing everything together in this meeting, which is why you have 200 pages here as part of your staff report.
Have you had any, I assume you've been implementing the design criteria as you go along with what you have. Have you had any complaints or comments related to your new criteria?
No, not specifically. The building department has been incorporating some of them, not 100%, because we don't have the final document, but but they have started the process, and they've been working with them. And the harbor design criteria was approved by our Harbor Commission in 2006. Just to give you an idea of just an example of a couple items in our design criteria, all of our drawings now are professionally done. Before they were handwritten, and we've been working on those or plan checking on those for a number of decades now. So we really have a good comprehensive package of some well thought out drawings that have been reviewed, which I'll go into later, the review process. But we're really quite pleased, and what this does is this gives us the tools with which to make good decisions. Just another example of, and I chose something that is relevant to a lot of folks in this room, the plans for a single residential pier and a residential gangway. So just some ideas of what it is that we did and how they look now.
Chris, if someone follows these standard plans, does that eliminate the need to hire an engineer to do engineering calcs?
Yes, it does. For most work, you still need engineering calculations for pile. The building department requires that. It has to be pre-stressed pile. But if you follow the basic rules here, you can get by with minimal calculations.
So Chris, does the new building codes come into play on these at all, which seem to offer more flexibility, or does this kind of substitute as a building code in terms of specific requirements?
You mean the uniform building code? Well, the building department certainly incorporates some of those with respect to, I believe, with ADA. But this is kind of its own separate document. So, yeah, dock construction is a bit different than land construction. This is too hard to read, and I understand that. But what it represents is a flow chart that we thought would be helpful for the folks that we've incorporated in this document. And what this represents, unfortunately, is the process that a dock applicant has to go through with all the regulatory agencies: the Coastal Commission, the Corps of Engineers, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the County of Orange, as well as the city. So it lays out the road work from which you have to travel down through the approval process. And, we help out the applicants a lot, and we guide them through this process. So it's not as daunting as it looks, but we're there to help them out. But a lot of people come to us and they say, well, what is the process? And so I think this flow chart helps. As far as the documents, this packet go, they were reviewed by many departments, and a lot of our departments in the city work with different aspects: permitting, fee collection, planning, construction monitoring, and code enforcement. And so all these folks and departments on this slide, which is virtually all the departments in the city, have played a major part with this reviewing and approving this document, as well as our Harbor Commission had a subcommittee with several concerned citizens, and the Harbor Commission provided formal approval for this at their September 13th, 2006 meeting. And this just says that environmental review we've considered CEQA, and we consider it categorically exempt, and this item has been noticed. So I'm available to answer any questions that the council might have.
Councilman Curry?
Thank you. It was a good presentation. Did I understand the Harbor Commission has had an opportunity to review this. Did they have any substantive changes or comments to the report, to the proposed new title?
No, they haven't. They were involved in the process from the very beginning, so they were helpful in shaping all these documents before it came to the Commission for formal approval.
Councilman Gardner?
I have two questions. 17, .50.020, which is the application for harbor development permits. And I know that later there's an appeal process, but is there any notice process? If someone is wanting to develop something, our neighbors know, or what sort of notice process is there, or is there any?
Generally, what we do, it says here that for projects that are, let's see, what's the word that they, yes, projects that are unusual in their nature, and they're not the standard single finger or single slip residential project, but let's say that they're unusual in some way, or let's say it's a large commercial project. We notice the surrounding residents within 300 feet of the property, and we send out notices that we are going to be considering this item at the Harbor Commission meeting. So they're noticed that way. But also, if you have to go to Coastal Commission, the Coastal Commission sends out notices too. So a couple different avenues that people are noticed.
Okay. And then would you comment, because I got an email about section, I believe it's 1735. 010J.
Yes. What that section describes is folks who are renting their piers out. And I think the concern of the email that you're referencing is that, and I'll just address it, it was perceived that this section would not cover the residential pier permittees. If there was let's say that there was a future increase in mooring rates or in fees throughout the city, throughout the harbor, that the residential pier permittees would not be affected. That was the concern of the email, was that the mooring folks might be singled out. And
The commercial factor would be paying for all of the bay services, and residents would not be paying their fair share.
Would not be paid. This section does not apply to that, and is not even a factor. This section right here, this paragraph, deals with rental charges, and it simply states the second sentence, and it states that if you are a residential pier permittee and you're using it for your own use, then you will not be charged a fee for using it in a commercial way. Does that make sense?
Okay, but let me just phrase it a little bit differently then. In the course of the development of the bay, our services provided, do we make an attempt to share the costs between not just the commercial sector, but also the residential sectors? So, because that was the real concern, that only the commercial sector might have to pay for certain services.
I think I can answer that question. In the process that we're going through right now in evaluating all the different fees for services and rental fees and fair market value of the different uses of the bay, we will make a fair assessment on the fair market value as it's attributed to the different commercial uses. There's specific statutory provisions in the public resources codes that allow for and state that even though a city can charge rent for commercial purposes and is required to charge rent for the fair market value of the use of tidelands, they cannot do so and are excluded from doing so for purely recreational piers used by the littoral landowners. This law has been around for about 30 years. There's been some Attorney General opinions that were written on this particular section of the code, and its last amendment, which was in 1978, specifically had those provisions with a finding that there was a public benefit for, private recreational piers for in emergency situations. And in other words, they provided for an emergency tie-up or something, some sort of an emergency situation for other recreational users, and that would be a sufficient public benefit to support the legislation. So it's a real interesting older area of law. There's been no cases on it. It's just, I think, been accepted over the years. And the last time we did an update on research on it was about 10 years ago. So I'm not sure maybe if anything's come up since then. So that's the reason why there's this specific limitation. But the intent of this section is to identify and to be able to charge rental fees for any private property owners that are using their piers for non-recreational purposes. In other words, they are renting out their piers for a commercial purpose. Then under those circumstances, the city would be able to establish, if the council chose to establish a fee or a rental for the ability for a private property owner, a single-family homeowner to rent their pier out. Did that answer?
Councilman Daigle?
Yes. I understand that over the time that Thailand's boundaries changed, and to the extent that, there's kind of some zigs and zags in all the maps, but we are in the process of compiling these various documents and various files, and we are going to plug that into our GIS, so we'll have some maps for the public in the future that I think will probably be pretty clean.
Yes, you're correct. We're working on our harbor area management plan, which will compile a lot of those documents together, and we are working with our GIS department.
Councilman Burhan?
Yeah, Chris, am I correct if I said that the reorganization of Title 17 was basically for the purpose of streamlining and making it easier and better to use, but really doesn't have much new content in it?
That is correct.
It was no intent to really introduce new subject matter, new regulations, et cetera.
That is correct.
Whereas the harbor design criteria, there is apparently a lot of new content in that?
Well, we are bringing, you are correct, we are bringing our construction standards up to date, modernizing them. And very consistent with the DBOS standards, Department of Boating and Waterways standards, and their design criteria. So we were working off documents from a safety perspective from 1973 in some cases, and bringing them up to 2007 standards.
I presume that you're going to have some sort of strategy to distribute this new harbor design criteria then, once it's enacted, so that people don't get a great big gotcha when they start to do something they thought they knew how to do?
Well, yes. We did solicit the feedback from the various dock builders in the harbor, and certainly we'll make sure that they have copies of this. We'll post it on our website, and we have copies in our office. So we catch people early, and catch isn't the right word, but when they come to us first before they even have a project, and we alert them of the new rules, and we'll be sure to distribute them to all the dock builders that work in Newport Harbor.
I've got a couple of questions. On the cantilevered patio decks, under the, in the old H1 policy, it was pretty specific on where they were permitted. It said Linda Isle, private waterways, et cetera.
Correct.
In the new criteria, it doesn't say specific areas, but it kind of describes the areas where they are permitted. And is that meant to describe the areas where they were permitted before? Or are we expanding the areas where cantilever decks are permitted? Or
No, we are intending to describe where they were permitted and keep it in that same area. We're not expanding cantilever decks elsewhere.
Okay. And then the other thing, I'd not necessarily in conjunction with this, but I'd like to see your department, the building department, look at coming up with some standardized plans for pilings to see if we can do that for the typical residential piers where you're not dealing with extra large boats, and maybe get away from having to do engineering calcs every time someone has to do a piling.
Okay. We can look into that.
I don't know what's all involved in it, but I was talking with Councilmember Webb, and it seems like it'd be something that you might be able to incorporate into some kind of a table for different size slips or something.
Okay. I can talk to the building department about that.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll open this up for public comment. See a few folks out there.
Those folks are coming for the next presentation, so they don't have any questions.
Oh, okay. I guess no one's there to comment. Okay. go on to the next item on our agenda, which is the capital improvement program progress tracking.
Mr. Mayor, this is something that the council, and in particular Councilwoman Daigle, has been interested in. So we kind of put our heads together and came up with something, and it may be kind of overkill, but one of the questions that we really needed to address was what kind of information should be available not only to council but to the whole community in terms of the number of CIP projects that we have going on. So we have some thoughts that we would like to share with you, and the purpose of this study session is really to get direction from you as to if you think we are on the right track. We're trying to design something that will have different layers of information depending upon how much information you seek. So from here, I'll turn it over to Steve Batum.
Well, it looks like we're having trouble getting our program up on the screen. Here it comes. Okay. Jamie Pollard is here tonight to kind of give us the overview. In fact, I'll give credit where it's due. This was kind of her brainchild and idea. And I'll tell you, she noticed that today, if you go on the web, you see there's a lot of web-based information pages that are very simple and easy to use, that give great amounts of information or little amounts of information and anything in between. And we thought there might be something that we could kind of take advantage of this kind of technology or this kind of use to give a little more up-to-date information when it's available. Up till now, we've done quarterly reports on the status of our projects, and we're thinking this could be something that could be, real time, so that this gets updated as we learn information, and it can be shared with not only council but members of the public. So I'll turn it over to Jamie and let her go through her program.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. As Steve mentioned, I'm the Finance and Administrative Manager for Public Works, and one of the tasks that I have under my duties is to prepare and present the CIP budget to the council for consideration and approval every year. What I want to do with this presentation is just briefly touch on what we've done with CIP development and reporting, and then go into the idea that we've come up with to address your issues when we presented the last quarterly report. The CIP plan has two purposes. The first is it's a funding plan. It tells us a specific period of time what our objectives are for a given period of time. Our CIP last year was also revamped so that it would be more user-friendly and is now sorted by functions rather than by funding sources, so that users in the departments and the public have the ability to see at a glance projects that they might be interested, whether it's water quality or street improvements or parks, and be able to pinpoint their projects or their project interests. The other thing that the CIP does is that it's a planning tool. It's used a lot internally as a means to allocate resources. It serves as a roadmap for setting our objectives. It helps us prioritize and appropriate the funds and allocation of staffing, and it's relational. There's different projects that have relationships with other projects, and we want to do them in the right order so that we're efficient and that we're doing things underground before we might do something above ground, and that we're not duplicating efforts or spending our resources inefficiently. And it's also a living document. It evolves pretty regularly, so that it's something that changes pretty dynamically. And I've got, I think, the next, or let me back up. One of the things that we do in the Public Works Department is our mission is to provide and protect the public improvements that the city has and provide services. When we look at CIP delivery, we're not only looking at what's our plan to spend money, but do we have the resources available? Do we have enough dollars? Do we have enough staffing? Do we have the organization to support it? And then our mission is to deliver those improvements and those services. And we've been spending a lot of time the last year to look at how we're organized. Do we have staff in the right place? Are we trained properly? We've got a number of staff members that are fairly new at project management. We're vamping them up as quickly as possible to meet the delivery demands that the CIP presents. And I pulled some data for you just to show you what our volume is in our CIP history. If we look back in the last 10 years, the first column represents what's approved in the budget. Those are approved line items for new appropriations and projects that may not have been completed in the previous fiscal year that are carried forward into the new fiscal year. If you look in the blue section, what was approved in the budget pretty much matches what was actually appropriated for that fiscal year, and then the expenditures are somewhere in the $20–25 million range. When you get to fiscal year 04-05, we approved $36 million in our budget, but through encumbrances that were on the books plus new appropriations, our real budget was in the neighborhood of $60 million. Of that, we moved from a $20 to $25 million delivery to a $30 to $40 million delivery, and we've been on that same pace for the last several years. So, for example, this fiscal year, we approved $41 million of new appropriations and carryover funds. When we added in July what was already on the books promised to vendors of work that was in progress, our budget represented $57 million. Today, with additional appropriations on new projects such as the Centennial, McFadden Square, I think we've appropriated for the Oasis design and some other projects that have come online since July 1st, our budget actually represents right now $61 million of projects to be delivered this fiscal year. Again, in the expenditure, we had for a number of years from the 80s, 90s, there was a little blip in 98 or 99 when we did the Arches interchange that increased our appropriation or our expenditures. But for the most part, we were doing a $20 million delivery program. We are now doing a $30 to $40 million delivery program. With that, we are looking at improving our system and our processes. We presented to you that new format of the CIP to make it more user-friendly and better for the users of the CIP, which are our managers. And we are looking at manpower allocation through the schedule. In October, we gave you an update of our schedule that was in our language that we understood. And the feedback that we got from the City Council is it's great, it's very thorough, but it's too technical and cumbersome. So with that feedback, we looked at what alternative ways can we communicate with you so that we can keep the managerial tools that we need to deliver the projects for the city, and also to be able to communicate that information to you and to the public. So in October was when we gave our first quarterly report. At that time, we also had a number of wildfires that were in the news, and anybody who was looking for information found information on map-based reporting. So we took that same concept and we worked with our IT folks and the GIS folks, and we came up with a prototype that we'd like to get your input on and like to be able to pursue in the next coming months. I'll show that to you now. What we have here is a snapshot of our GIS system. Rather than have users go into a multi-layered, very information-intensive database, we wanted something that would be user-friendly and quick to look at so that the different colors could represent easy to identify stages of progress that projects are in. Also, we wanted the information to be readily available and quick to pull up so that the user can have the access to the information as quickly as possible. So it mimics and looks like our GIS system, but it's actually a snapshot representation. This is just a sampling of the projects that we have in our current CIP in various stages of completion. The legend up on the upper right-hand side shows that the Projects that are in yellow are in a planning stage. Projects that are in blue are design phase. Green is permitting, red is construction, and black is closeout. If I wanted to, I could, if I had 200 projects represented on there, it would look very colorful and like confetti. You wouldn't be able to zero in and look specifically on maybe a project that you want to know, gee, I know that I've got 5 projects that I'm interested in that are in construction. The user can toggle those check boxes off to the right and only look at the construction if they chose. So what's left, if I had 200 projects up there and say I had 10% or 20 in construction, I could have 20 dots and maybe look at the dots and zero in on which project that I might be interested in looking for more information. Once I identify either an area or a dot, and one of the other things that we don't have on this demonstration but that we're looking for is to have a pull-down list by alphabetical title, so that if you just know the title, you can pull up the information, or if you know the family or functional area that it appears in the budget, you can look at maybe just streets-related projects, so that the filters will allow the user to, at a glance, be able to look at the information from their point of perspective or from what information that they're most interested in. When the user clicks on one of the dots, there's only 4 commands that they have the ability to use at the top. One is to zoom in closer to the map. One is to pan out or zoom out and see a more global picture of the city boundaries. The pan is to move from side to side or up to down. And identify, if I were to pin or I hit the identify button, thank you. And then click on that dot that I'm interested in, I'm pulled up detailed information about what the project status is. I'm given the project manager, the budget, whether the budget is on time or looks like it's going to be going over. It gives me a status on the schedule, where it's at, and the latest activity. If what we're hoping to do with our folks that are assisting us with the database end of this is, if you have interest in what the history of activity is, you could further click on the activity line and then be pulled up more detailed information or photographs or representations or conceptual plans or useful information that would give you at a glance a bigger or a broader perspective of where we are in any given project. And then I don't have anything further to add on where we're at with this, other than to say that we plan to continue to provide you with quarterly updates on our projects that are existing. This is conceptual, and what I want tonight is to be able to get some feedback so that we can develop something that meets your expectations. Some of this may seem exciting and great and you want to go. Some of it may seem like, oh, I thought we'd get something a little bit different. And then we could take that information and be able to deliver what it is that you're expecting. So in February, we have a quarterly update due to council to let you know what our second quarter progress is, and we'll continue to do that. We're also looking at refining that information so that it's more useful. In the meantime, we'd like to develop this information and have it tied in line with the fiscal 08-09 budget that will be considered and approved in June for July 1st. Depending on how quickly the IT folks can help us with the back-end database, we'd either do a test period with internal access on our intranet so that we can get useful feedback from other departments and from council, and then deliver to the public as soon as it's a useful product. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on this concept.
Councilmember Webb?
In your box off to one side, approximately how often do you think you would be able to update that box?
The idea is to update it as information becomes available. So as project managers know of the information, it would be real-time information. If there's a Coastal Commission hearing that is scheduled, we would put that information and have that available. If there was a council action that changed the scope of the project or hired certain consultants, we would add that information. So some activity, if it were a planning phase project that's in a slow development, it wouldn't change as often. But something that may be more in the permitting or the construction side of projects, it would have more activity.
Okay, this is a construction phase, and it's a little bit finer than I can actually read in the box over there, but your thought process is that under the construction projects, you would list the contractor and when he started and what his projected time would be for construction and whether he's over or under any change orders and that type of thing processed? Or
Again,
would you get into that kind of detail?
It would have a layered effect so that at summary, you could see what the stage or status is of a project and not have to burrow down or read too much. If you're specifically interested in what the construction schedule is, further attachments could be made to the schedule section, and it could say the contractor was awarded a notice to proceed on February 1st and is expected to be completed by April 30th, and have that type of information. But at this level, it would be summary information. You'd have to click a line item further to go down deeper.
If I could chime in on that too, the idea here is we can tag in just about any information you'd want to see. In particular, like I say, a project that's under design, we may be able to tag in an actual concept plan. You click on it, it'll come up. In construction, we could even have construction photos. Lane closure issues could be prominently displayed. We could use this in any, it's very, we can easily manipulate it to show just about anything we want to highlight. The idea is, you can get the, I think as Jamie said, you can kind of get the initial information at a glance, but if you want to go farther and want more information, you might be able to click on the budget line and learn more about how that project evolved in the budget and how much money's there, what funds might be funding it, as well as you could click onto the status and maybe see a more blown up, full-on bar chart on the project status and, maybe when it went to bid and when it was awarded and all those kinds of information. So I think the beauty of this idea is that we can put as much information on or as little information, and the folks that want more information can drill down and get that information as needed. And so I guess really what we're looking for is that we want to move forward with this kind of a concept, and then what kinds of bits of information we'd like to see.
Pro Tem Daigle?
Yes. Appreciate all your hard work on this, and would encourage you to continue in this direction. And I think, web-based management is certainly something that's emerging. For example, Starbucks, where they have a 23-day bill schedule, everyone is on that web at the end of the day, reporting the status, so things can be rolled up from, all across the country. So I think the GIS makes sense, too. That would be the common tie-in. In terms of the types of information that the council would be looking for, because this grew out of the idea of how can we collectively deliver on this 40, which has now grown to $60 million worth of projects. And so the information that we were looking for that doesn't necessarily have to be available to the public would be along the lines of, and these are pretty standard reporting questions, when did the project start, when was the project supposed to start, when was the project completed, when was the project supposed to be completed, are there any cost increases? And so that way we can kind of get a sense of where we're going with it, and it might also be helpful in terms of an internal management tool. But I can see that you obviously have come up with some very creative applications that certainly I may not have ever thought of, and I think they're really good, and I would encourage you to continue in that direction because I think it's good public information as well.
Councilman Henn?
Yeah, I applaud you for this effort. I think it's a great one question to clarify. The data that goes into this to support the website, I'm hoping you're going to tell me that the data is sourced from material that is already otherwise entered for purposes of the staff managing the work that they do. In other words, the updates to the website are not an additional effort to keep the website up to date. Is that true? I'm thinking particularly of what Councilman Webb was talking about in that white box there.
We have information in a variety of documents and sources, so our intent is to have compatibility, that we aren't duplicating data entry, but some of it will be developed so that we are encouraging younger and new project managers to take what information that they have perhaps in their files or inside of their head and put it in a place that we can see as managers and be able to communicate that.
Well, I would encourage you to source your data for this website based upon information as to the greatest extent possible that's already being generated within the department for its own purposes.
That's one of our goals, is user-friendliness to staff as well as to the user.
Because the other risk that you run is that there's a difference in information. You're operating internally off of something that's different on the website, newer or less new, and it can lead to confusion, so I just caution you in that respect. But then I would echo Councilmember Daigle's comments that we need to move to the next level where we can, and that's expectational information, as she was describing. What was our original expectation for dollars, timing, whatever, and be able to provide easy-to-read information regarding how we're doing versus expectations. Lastly, we do have a Finance Committee initiative here for measurements, and when we get rolling on that, which we hope is soon, one component of that will deal with measurements for capital improvement projects, and I'd encourage you to stay open to that process, which I'm certain you will be involved with anyway, as to how that might fold in and dovetail with what you're doing here. Perhaps there may be some ideas that will be worth enhancing what you're doing. So.
But Jamie, if I could follow in on Councilman Henn's first issue, and that is who inputs the data, and would they be inputting it just into this program? Let's say we have East Bluff street reconstruction, and a third of that project is finished, or at least the scraping is finished. In the direct project that's ongoing, would that data be inputted onto this program here just for this purpose? Or would it be someplace else too and then be captured?
Well, as I mentioned, the data is coming from a variety of sources, so a lot of the structural information is developed during the CIP process when a project is approved. We know who the project manager is, we know the description, we know what the expectation is of that project. As a project moves into different phases, particularly in construction, it's what we would define as what's the phase of a project, when is it 35% complete or 50% complete, or where is it tracking on some milestone or marking. And that would involve Steve and Dave Webb, who's our deputy director, and their input as to define those parameters of when is a project over budget, when is a project still ongoing that we don't know the end game plan, or not the end game plan, but the end result yet, if it's midway project.
And if I could add on to that a little bit, our purpose, and I hear what's being said, and I couldn't agree with you more. Certainly, we're not interested in trying to develop a lot of extra work that's going to slow us down in the capital program. And as Jamie says, a lot of this information is already kind of built in. The one thing that is different, though, is that some of this information is there, but it's just not readily transparent. And I think there is going to have to be some level of effort here in order to provide this information, but I think it's information that needs to be out there. It needs to be transparent. It needs to be where everyone can find it. A lot of this information we have, but it isn't really in a format that anyone can really understand. So there is going to be a little bit of an effort in trying to translate that information. We're certainly going to look at the most efficient way. Again, we don't want this to become its own we don't want to become the master to this web page and miss what we really should be doing is getting the projects done.
Councilman Curry?
Well, Steve, I would just applaud you because I think this is an excellent initiative. I'm very pleased with the results of what you've got. Two recommendations I would make is to make sure that we're able to link this amongst the city's website. For example, if somebody's in the Newport Coast page on the website and is concerned about what's the status of Pelican Hills Road North, they can click a link and go to this update and be able to get the information. The same thing for Oasis and some of the other projects that we have going on, so people can link amongst and maneuver through the city's website. And secondly, to make sure that there is a name and a phone number people can call if they have questions or information for follow-up, because a lot of times you just simply can't get what you need looking at the website and you talk to a human being. I think that makes this an excellent tool.
Great.
Okay, Councilman Hunt?
Just one quick more idea. I've had some experience managing websites in the past, and one of the very hardest things is to keep them up to date, current, and accurate. And in addition to that, I've had the experience of opening up a website and seeing something on it and thinking, who in the heck authorized that? How'd that get there? Now, I know the city operates multiple websites. I'm sure you've got rules about that, but particularly in terms of information like this, I'd just caution again, make sure you've got good rules for who is authorized to enter information and make changes.
We're also thinking about pull-down menus of our CIP projects have many of the same repetitive steps. So the more we can funnel the information on specific choices, the less chance there is on creative wording.
Councilman Daigle?
Yes, there's one project I'd be interested to see on this, and that's the signal synchronization. And it might be easier to explain sort of on the internet or graphically. I know attempts to explain it through sort of hand language haven't been very good, so that might be one to put on.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody from the public want to comment on this item? Okay, are there any public comments on non-agenda items? Okay, we're adjourned to closed session.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just real quick, I wanted to answer a question that I understand came up as I was walking in about the one item on the consent calendar.
Which item's that?
I understand that one of the council members had a question about the designated employee list for my office. And I went back and looked at that, and what happened was in the beginning of this fiscal year, the council approved a reorganization of my office, so I no longer have a contract attorney, part-time contract attorney. I now have 2 part-time deputies. And so what I did was we took off the part-time contract attorney, but then we failed to, under the part-time deputy, change the number from 1 to 2. It's the only change, so we need to make that change to have both of the part-time contract attorneys be on that list as designated employees.
Okay, that would cover, the question was regarding Kathy Wilcott.
Yeah, that would cover both Kathy Wilcott and Donna Beachy.
Okay, so we're going to have to pull that then off the agenda to add that?
You don't have to pull it off. We'll just ask that it's basically a typographical or clerical error. We'll make sure it gets fixed for the approval.
Okay. Okay, we're adjourned to closed session.